So today I thought I would take a look at kata. I wanted to do a real in-depth video just covering some of the finer details of kata, particularly if you've passed Shodan and maybe you've got like the first 5 kata kind of learned, like you know the shape of them quite well. Maybe you're a little sketchy on 6 and 7, you've maybe had a little experience with kodachi. But anyway, from that kind of Shodan, Nidan, Sandan level, this will help you obviously learn the shape of the kata if you don't know them. But it'll also help you to understand the techniques and what you're actually doing. And I'd always seen those videos, you know, where somebody stuck a GoPro inside their men and they were doing kirikaishi or something like that. And that looks very cool, but usually it's also, you know, it's not necessarily been implemented as a teaching tool or a coaching tool. And I thought there was an opportunity to try something like that, that maybe we could learn something about the interaction. I think the greatest lesson that kata has to teach us is in principles of the sword. It's meant to be our connection to kenjutsu, the roots of kendo, where it came from. And we can learn a lot about the interaction between uchitachi and shidachi, and also about waza, you know, how waza actually work. And when you first learn the shape of the kata, you don't really do very much. And I think kata has a habit as well, because of that uchitachi shidachi thing, that relationship. It has a tendency to sometimes be a little bit misunderstood. So when people are learning to do techniques like oji waza in particular, there's a great habit or misunderstanding early on that you should, you know, wait for the other person to attack. And I think some of that has kata to blame for it. It's probably the wrong way of putting it. Like I said, it boils down to just, I think, being a misunderstanding. We tend to focus on kata in more depth much later on in our kendo. And while I think that's probably the right thing, because it's just so much to do in Bogu with your shinai work, there's so much to do to get your body moving, just to acquire basic kikentai no ichi and things like this in the lower levels. And you know, as I say, I mean, that goes all the way up to third dan. That, yeah, by the time we're rolling around to really trying to understand kata, yeah, it's quite late in our kendo for some of us. So yeah, I wanted to take this opportunity to give people a bit of a platform that if they want to explore kata a bit more deeply, a little bit more early on, then they have the opportunity to do so. I should also caveat this, you know, this is all just based on teachings that I've received over the years from various different teachers. Some of them have different interpretations from each other. You know, so one sensei might say one thing about a particular technique and how they'd like to see it done and the reasons for that, and another sensei may have a slightly different interpretation of that depending on their teacher and what they've been taught and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a couple of different paths up the mountain, as they say in the classics. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get stuck in. We'll start with Ippon-me. So the main thing I want to highlight in Ippon-me is first off this basic relationship between uchitachi and shidachi. That uchitachi, generally speaking, for most of the kata, moves first and essentially presents a theoretical situation to shidachi. And the yell, you know, the kiai or the kakego or the shout, ya, is to represent, you know, here is the opportunity that's coming for you to do your technique, for shidachi to do their technique. And to, it's kind of a confirmation from shidachi, this is my technique. And it's an acknowledgement that the teacher can observe that technique and scrutinize it. You know, it's like if you don't yell to, then something's maybe gone wrong. You should be given the opportunity to try again. You know, maybe there's been a misunderstanding, or somebody's just had a bit of a, you know, brain fart or something like that, frozen in the moment. But if you yell to, that's your technique and you're sticking by it. That's kind of the way I see that ya-to interaction. So Ippon-me, uchitachi takes hidari jodan, and pretty much immediately shidachi takes migi jodan. So Hidari Jodan is left foot forward. The sword is angled at a 45-degree angle back over the head, but also back and over to the right. What this does is very interesting because it's Jodan would appear that you're fighting with everything open, but in Hidari Jodan that's less the case than Migi Jodan, I would say. Hidari Jodan does something with the mai as well, so you slightly intrude already into the other person's mai. You're stepping forward into Hidari Jodan and assuming a kamai that's slightly hanme, slightly hanme, so you're slightly twisted in your body, and it really facilitates a little bit of extra reach. So it's an aggressive kamai. It adds reach, and it crucially blocks the shomen with the tsuka, the grip of the sword, right? So this is important to bear in mind when you're thinking about what targets are available. And also because you're in Hanmi. Did I say Hanme earlier? Hanmi. So this twisting, the slight twisting of the torso. That actually, although the door is more directly facing the opponent, the person in Jodan, their left side of their door, it actually makes it more awkward to hit it, okay? So something to bear in mind. Whereas if they take a very straight hip Hidari Jodan in Shinai Kendo and modern interpretations of Jodan, the door is somewhat easier to hit. It's easier to achieve the Hasuji, the angle of the blade against it. Anyway, that's just a side note. So you advance your 3 steps in. Now, what Shidachi does here is quite important. Taking Migi Jodan is not a coincidence. Why not match in Hidari Jodan? Well, Jodan players like to offer bait or incentive, right? It's no good just fighting with everything open and going, hey, look at me, how brave I am. Everything's open. I dare you to hit me. I double dare you. There is a bit of that attitude. You know, come on, I'm ready to die. As it's highlighted in the Chibo Sensei videos and things like that. That's true, that is there. But it's not nonsensical. There is reason to it. And so in the case of Shidachi taking Migi Jodan, their hands are directly above the head. Now the target for Ichidachi against Shidachi is men, not the hands, right? It's striking the men. Shidachi's kind of assumed this posture on purpose to allow for that strike. The kata really represents the fundamental basis of Kenjutsu and Kendo, which is the first lesson is cut or be cut, right? So, by taking this posture, you're allowing this aggressive assailant the opportunity to end the confrontation in one stroke, but they're going to have to do something that they wouldn't really ideally like to do, right? So when Uchidachi makes this cut, it has to be quite a hard and powerful cut. Now when you're doing the kata, I'm not saying cut it really hard, because it's a learning exercise, right? The kata is not a literal fight. Obviously once you've got a bit of confidence and you're working with partners that you know you can go to a certain level, yeah, you can put some significant power into that stroke, knowing that they will be savvy enough to step out the way. But as a beginner, don't just go swinging at people as hard as you can, right? That's not really the point of the exercise. But the premise of the kata is that Shidachi is baiting Uchidachi to make a hard killing strike to go through the hand and achieve the men strike. This is partially the reason why Uchidachi overswings and ends up pitched with the head forward. Shidachi, inviting that men, as soon as that stroke is committed, steps back and lifts their hands sharply to avoid being cut. This is nuki waza, men nuki men. So the strike goes through, you step back, lift your hands out of the way, and immediately step forward and strike men. Because you've invited this aggressive attack, you get this overswing, but it's also because Uchidachi is the teacher, and this facilitates them scrutinizing Shidachi's technique. So you do your to. From this position, they're able to look up without moving their head, just using their eyes. They're able to look and see, did you cut to target? Were you short? Were you deep? That kind of thing. Uchidachi then takes a very small step back. And what they're looking for is the understanding of, you know, that because you were unable to physically strike them, you're still able to demonstrate it. The cut should have come down to the eyes. Cut into the target, not up on top of the target. So that's a checkpoint for Uchidachi. Then they want to see this continued control of the opponent's zanshin, this continuous awareness of the situation. So Shidachi at this point drives their kensen through using ayumiashi footwork, right? So they had right foot forward, left foot is going to come forward, push through, and you're going to push off the right foot. So most people would just step through. Yeah, they would just swap their left foot for the right foot. That's not enough. It's left foot, push off with the right foot, and then hiketsuke, bring the right foot up sharply into hidari jodan. This will mean that your uchidachi is forced to take a very defensive step back. If you don't do this correctly, this footwork, this full ayumiashi step, where you actually drive off of the right foot as you go through and achieve hiketsuke, then it doesn't really have the same desired effect, okay? And if it were in a practical, real situation with your, say, in your Shinai Kendo, and you did that, there's a good chance that the opponent will see that as a potential opportunity to regain control. Okay, and that's kind of the lesson of that part of the kata, is to keep that control, that you need to have that intention, and it needs to show in your physical application of the footwork. From there, Uchidachi gently lifts their sword back up towards Chudan, indicating in a non-confrontational way that they've seen what they needed to see. Shidachi then has reason to step back and go back into Chudan, and both players finish back on the center line. And then you retreat, you take Kamae Toku, yeah, where your swords go down and slightly to the right with an open facing blade, again a non-aggressive posture, and that's done mutually. Uchidachi moves first, Shidachi slightly behind that in response. You back away your 5 steps and you're ready for the next kata. And so that's Ippon-me, very much about baiting. Now, something you can add to this kata, if you want to spice it up as a Shidachi, once you've got confidence and you want to push ahead with it, is challenge yourself to be able to set the timing of when Uchidachi makes their cut. And what I mean by that is, when you take your 3 steps in Migi Jodan, as you advance on that 3rd step, you can aggressively step in, because Jodan, you can be quite bold and aggressive with it. So you 1, 2, 3, right? And you offer this, come on, hit me on that last step. But just be careful of the mai. If you step too close, you're not going to have enough room to step back and avoid getting struck on the fingers potentially. But if you don't have any kind of zing to it on that step, then it looks a bit contrived. It just looks a bit like a rehearsal. So this is a way that you can bring some of what you do in Shinai work to your kata and vice versa. And you can take this lesson into your Shinai Kendo as well, which is when we step in to make seme, there's different ways you can do that. You can cautiously step in to see if that's going to invite an attack immediately. Some people really like to jump. As if you press them hard and sharp with your footwork, they really like to bite at that cherry. They're really eager to strike, or maybe very nervous, or maybe they block. But it's one of those places where you can kind of play with that concept in a very calm, otherwise calm and understood environment, because you know what's going to happen in the kata, right? So there's not a lot that can go wrong. You're not really worried too much about losing or anything like that. So it's a nice place to learn the kata. Nihonme. Both players advance in Chudan, right? So both in Chudan. 3 steps in, Uchidachi leads, Shidachi follows a split second later. They meet in the middle, and a good thing to work on here is that there needs to be good contact between the tips of the Bokuto. So both players should fight for center. Now don't overpress and don't underpress. If you underpress, the telltale is that your Bokuto will sort of clunk. They'll be like clunk, 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 clunk. So it should be firm, so that doesn't happen. But if you push too much, it's contrived, okay? What you want is just a nice, I'm on the center line, and no, I'm on the center line, but you're not, it's not like a movie. You're not really putting a lot of force into it. Okay, so this is how you enter into Isoku Ippon-me, 1 step, 1 cut distance. Now, what Shidachi can do to make this kata, it's a simple kata. It's kote nuki kote. And kind of the moral story of the kata is, you know, if somebody's coming there but their intention hasn't been to kill you, you know, have a measured response. So basically there's got a bit of growth of the kenshi in this one, because rather than just respond by trying to obliterate the person, you kind of match their level of aggression. Yeah, so they've only come to wound you, they haven't come to kill you, and so you respond with control, and it would be a wounding strike. Yeah, kote nuki kote. So one of the things you can do that you can work on in terms of the interaction is, as you advance in a Shidachi and you get that firm contact, at the second where you would like Uchidachi to make the strike, and don't leave it too long, because then it's contrived, okay? And if you leave it too long, the Uchidachi is just going to go anyway. But what you can do is, as you make that pressure in, just give their Kensen a slight push to your left, yeah, which would be their right, as if going to strike men. Yeah, as if you were almost pushing the Bokuto slightly out the way to step in and take men, like a Shikake men. This is a natural, nice, functional way of controlling the timing and creating a situation that Uchidachi would actually realistically strike a kote. If they believed you were about to lift your hands to cut a men, this is a good opportunity to strike kote. So you now give Uchidachi a good reason to strike that kote. You also now know the timing. Now here's the cool part, the thing that makes Nihonme look polished, right? Your job as Shidachi, as they step in and cut the kote, is to step back and to the left, mostly back, only a little to the left, just enough that they would just miss your arm. Not so wide that you're at like a 45-degree angle. That's way too wide. You just want to be 25 degrees, 35 degrees at most, maybe off to the left. But you want to make a big step back to make space for it, so you can step forward and cut a nice, beautiful big kote. The trick is, I think, to making the timing look good, is you need to show that you can get them to commit to the kote. So it's no good if their hands are still above their head and you step back really early, because in a real situation they could change their mind during that swinging motion and cut them in, or drop it down and onto your ski or something like that. So if you wait until it's coming forward towards you and it's kind of, you know, they're committed now, it's definitely going to be a kote. So you're kind of making that step back and that drop to gedan as Shidachi, dropping a sword to the lower guard. You're doing that, you're basically receiving the kote in, right? Getting them to really commit that sword to coming down. And that's the best way to kind of do that nuki waza. You know, you like I said, if you jump the gun, they have an opportunity to change course, right? They can abort their attack, they can do all kinds of things. So to make it work, you need to understand when it's going to happen, and you need to get them to commit their posture, commit their body to it. And then you can make this nice sharp step back and to the left, sharp step forward as quick as you can, and you only really need to lift the Bokuto high enough that you can see clearly what's going on beneath it. So many people make the same lift as they would for men. It's not entirely necessary. Most high-level teachers, they'll be fine as long as you can see clearly, you know, say from their chest to down for that moment of making the strike. That's acceptable. From there, a nice way to finish the kata, most people will just mutually step back to center. But what you can do is from your kote, when you strike that kote, strike it from an angle. Like I said, if you're going mostly back, not too much to the left, your kote should be on their center. Okay, so when you've cut the kote, it shouldn't be pointing off away out of the line of your body, or their body. It should be cut the kote, and it should be in line with their sternum, basically, pointing that way. So from here, to finish the kata, you can take the initiative by just lifting the tip of your sword to give them a visual threat to their more skidare kind of area, right, to the throat area. They'll be able to see this in their peripheral. And it's a very slight, and I do mean subtle, step forward and to the right to recover. And if you've got a really good partner, you can make this look really nice and natural. And it takes away some of the work for having to get back to center, right? Because you're going to have to, Uchidachi took it one step forward to make that kote strike. When you step back and you step forward to make your kote strike, you're not back on center yet. So by lifting your sword and putting a bit of pressure on you, encourage your Uchidachi to step back to where they started from, and that allows you to step back and into the center. They're in the position where they're sort of beaten, so their tip of their sword should be under yours at this point. Yep. So you cut the kote, make the pressure. As you recover, they come from underneath and meet you mutually, and you'll find your way back to center from there. So, Sanbon-me, probably for many people one of the hardest kata, if not the hardest kata, to get right. Both players start in Gedan. Uchidachi is slightly, ever so slightly higher than Shidachi. So the best way to do this is that Uchidachi does their best Gedan no Kamae. Shidachi observe their Kamae and try to adjust to being lower than them as best you can from distance. As you're stepping in, you can correct slightly. The idea is come in slightly below theirs, right? Now there'll be a gap because once you lift the swords, they'll cross, okay? At Isoku Ippon-me for ski, which is not the same as men, so not tip to tip like this, but usually just a little bit deeper than that. It's a fight to get to the center line. So here, if you're both here in Gedan, this is a stalemate. This person can't go because the other person's got this thrusting control. And the same is true of the other side. If you suddenly lift and go, then you can be skied, right? So there's a tension, a battle of tension, battle of wills. So if you rush to this position, you receive the thrust, right? So it comes up slowly and tense. But if you reach Aichudan together, it's a stalemate again. So there's no point in that. So what happens is, you're coming up, and then Uchidachi, by the time the swords kind of get straight, they're not in kama yet, they're kind of straight, Uchidachi seizes the opportunity, takes the initiative, and yeah! And the ski that's made is ski towards the solar plexus, right? Shidachi's response is to step back sharply using okuriashi and thrust the sword out and forwards. Use the hatsuji of your bokuto, so it will be this way, so it's like over to your right, so open hand, so that way, yeah. So but that and forward to control the center, and it's a calm and measured response from Shidachi, and this is key. So it's basically a calm under fire. Control the mai, control the center line. Soon as you've got that control, you should immediately step in and return your thrust. To! So it should be ya to immediately, not ya stop to. That's too late. This is a key part of the kata. It's really hard to execute, but it really shows you that you've got a grasp of it if you're the Shidachi. From there, it's press again, then 1, 2, 3, and pressure up to the eyes. Uchidachi's response to this is they make their ski, they immediately step back and they assume a Hanmi position with the right leg to the back, right? And you've got to come around and control with your Bokuto. So to come around under and to the left, and then assume the blocking posture. It works a little bit like Kirikashi, where you use your tsuka against your hip, your retreating hip, and you use the angle of the blade and you try to get the tip of their Bokuto out of center. Immediately though, they're gonna, because they have the advantage of the distance, so they continue to press you. So you're immediately stepping back with your left foot, also assuming Hanmi, a twist in your posture, and your left fist comes down to your left hip, and you again, now you're using, so you use the backhand controlling angle, Hasuji, for the first step, and the open hand controlling position for the second step. And then immediately it's left foot moves back, Ayumiashi, left, right, left, Hiketsuke, pull the right foot up. You're dropping the tip of your Bokuto down to Kamae Toku. Okay, as they bring it up to your eyes. Again, Uchidachi then slowly lifts their Bokuto to indicate that they've seen what they wanted to see in the kata. And Shidachi mutually takes 2 steps back to achieve Chudan and Isoku Itanamai, contact on the swords, and then both retreat 3 steps together back towards the center line. But the key thing in here is the control of center. So get the footwork right, show that you can control the center, and then try to achieve the timing of the waza, which is that immediate response from Shidachi. Okay, if that response from Shidachi isn't immediate, then Uchidachi doesn't really have a reason to block those skis coming in. Okay, it needs to be sharp so that Uchidachi is put under pressure and loses the battle over the mai. That's really key, because at a closer distance, ski is a big threat. Very, very big threat. So this, yeah, the whole waza kind of hinges on that immediate response from Shidachi. Okay, so that's where we're going to leave it for this episode. We've tackled the first 3, and the next episode we'll talk about Nihonme, Gohonme, and Ropponme, and then after that, and we'll probably do Nanahonme as well in that batch, and then I'll do the 3 Kodachi one separately. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, do all those good things, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care, bye bye.